But here we mean hybrid, open and non-open. So you can see that some companies are becoming way more open, other companies are going maybe the other way. So I think MySQL was a good example of fully open source, restricted license, Oracle. I mean, that was a paradigm shift for that company. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about some statistics from the open source world. I think they're pretty interesting. One of the questions I'm going to try and answer for you, which for me was a surprise, is why does anybody contribute to open source? Which is a good question right away. Does anybody here contribute to open source? In any way, shape, or form? Jacob? No?
The occasional bug fixing.
Bug fixing? That's pretty cool. I mean, that's you know, you saw what level you were. You were, you know, pretty high up.
I think the model needs to change there in recent memory. For example, GitHub allows you to submit a patch which is then reviewed by a core developer and applied if it's correct.
True.
So that makes it a lot easier to actually apply code to the code base.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, how easy is it to get from that level to that level? So the code goes that way, but of course these guys still put their stamp on it, and that's important. Man in het groene shirt, weet je? Tim.
Yeah, I'm also contributing to the open source in the sense that it's an open source screen reader for the line for which sometimes I have committed a few bug reports.
Cool. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't find reason time to actually program anything myself, and I've also contributed a bit financially to keep that project going. It's really important. They need some funding to get it underway and to keep it under development.
Yeah. So do you hear that? He's contributing in two very important ways. He's reporting bugs, obviously important, but also supporting them financially. Have you all done your Wikipedia? Of course not, you're poor students, but one of my best friends, he once dragged me to the computer and said, give money to Wikipedia now because you use it every day. You're a scientist. Just give them the money. And of course, I'm one of those guys who never pays for everything or anything, so I'm Dutch, of course, so I try to avoid payment as much as possible. But you know, that's a really good point. So you too can contribute financially to the one tool that you use every day, or and I recommend it. It's a very satisfying feeling. All right, so here we have a nice survey. You will all maybe one day do one of these surveys for your MBI or for whatever masters you're going to do. And the question, so this wasn't from MBI, this was from the University of Bath in the UK. So here you see, okay, what do you expect to benefit from as a company? If you're a customer, how do you expect to benefit from open source? So quicker turnaround on bug fixes, 22%. Oh, maybe we should go to the bottom. Low costs. Now the interesting thing is that this may not be true for obvious reasons. It could be. I mean, at the end of the day, you're giving a lot of control. Well, you're gaining a lot of control, but you also gain a lot of extra work. Whereas if you have a company that does your implementation, so if you buy from me a lathe site, then pretty quickly I can have you up and running in a couple of days. Of course, if you want to change something completely, change the ideal system and take it out, well, that's not going to happen. It's not open source. If it was open source, you could do whatever you want. You can, completely remove the payment system and have people paying peanuts. I mean, that's whatever you want. So you're buying a lot of control, but that also incurs extra costs. Reduce dependency on vendor, that's of course a really good one. So a bunch of companies have tried to switch more to Linux. Ubuntu is a good example of that. In Africa, Ubuntu is being used a lot. Imagine you're running an internet cafe. You would like to have a good operating system, solid operating system. Windows is, and Apple is a whole other ballgame. You don't even want to think about it. So you have to find a good way so you can get independent. And if you don't like Ubuntu, the next day you can switch to BSD or whatever you want to switch to. Ease of integration, open standards, flexibility in deployment, access to the source code, extendability, customizability. That's all, of course, somewhere related to also these 2 points. Speed of innovation to the software, they're expecting to be quicker than at a company, because at a company, they have to use their product as a cash cow. Any surprises here? Would you expect anything not there, or anything? Was there anything there that you didn't expect? No? For me, new. Yeah. Looks reasonable. All right, so motivation for contribution. This is an exam question, so pay attention, stay awake. I know that we're about half an hour in, so by now you should be asleep. I once heard about this curve that after about 20 minutes I could say whatever you want and you're all gone. So 20 to 30 minutes is the worst spot, basically. Well, we already crossed that, so we're good again. You're all paying attention again. I hope you're feeling awake and after this slight dip. So these are the two motivations, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic is sort of internal, so how are you feeling better by the end of the day? Extrinsic is how you actually profit from your contribution. So the fact that he was now able to, or basically he allowed me to tell about my contribution to Wikipedia, I now feel like a better person. You guys hear about it, that's extrinsic. I felt better about it already, and that is an intrinsic one because I walk with a step. So here you see some small things. So it's fun to contribute. I enjoy it. Altruism. I want to make the world a better place. Obligation to contribute. So you feel like, wow, I'm using this so much now. I'm using Firefox so much. It's my browser for everything I do in daily life. So I should definitely give something back. And then of course there's extrinsic motivation, so maybe you get better salary. In job interviews, if you're a developer and you can say, well, I can't show you the code that I wrote for my previous company because that would be illegal, but what I can show you is the code that I wrote for Firefox. And then of course that's the moment when people fall flat on their face and go, Firefox, you're developing for Firefox, that's the rules, that's the best developer we've seen up to now. So immediately you say, you're somebody of worth. Signaling, bonus. And of course, one thing we should also not forget is that in the case of Canonical, money is made. So that's real extrinsic motivation. Alright, so intrinsic, obligation, community-based. So Vincent is every day telling me, come on, Slinger, help us a little bit. Every day we're working on LaTeX and I'm programming my ass off and you're just sitting there using LaTeX like it's nothing. Come on, do something for me. So then, of course, I'll do something. Enjoyment-based, so Vincent actually says, Slinger, that bug you fixed for LaTeX, it bothered me every day, and now life is much better. So, enjoyment, altruism, I personally feel like, hey, look at me, I'm fixing LaTeX, I'm helping a lot of people. So gift-giving, and self-effectiveness, so that you feel like, hey, I'm achieving something here. My tool's not, or this open source tool is not doing what I want it to do, so let me make it more effective, more efficient. Extrinsic, well, I think I already mentioned it, signaling, user needs, so that if you're working at a company, imagine you're working at a school, and you're using an open source like Sugar CRM system, and you're managing all the students in there, and somebody says, this system is great, but it's a CRM system, it wasn't meant for schools, and we need to administer grades in this. And then you go, alright, I'll program grades into it, and it will take you 2 months, and then maybe you have a nice grades module. Motivation difference, content versus software. I think what we're talking about, the content versus software is of course really important. Think about Firefox, there you have software, so you're writing code and you're making it function. But content is language, manuals, making sure that all the buttons sound right in Dutch and they don't have this weird English translated sound to them. Would we have all known the word annuleren before IT? Probably not. It's just because people use cancel and they thought, what's a good translation for cancel? Probably we would have gone for afbreken or something, but because annuleren became the big word, that's how it influenced language. Alright, so those factors are now repeated here in a big survey, and people had to score from 0 to 5 how they felt about certain things. Well, as you can see, 4.10 to 4.9, everybody scored somewhere between 5 and 4, so these were all considered important. So let me just take a look at it. It's fun, chance to do the job I feel I do the best, very interesting. Developers are strange beasts, I can tell you, and many developers are considered slaves by their employers. So they just say, okay, tomorrow I want you to build me an Excel screen, and don't use Excel, give me something that's exactly the same, but build it. And of course the developer goes insane because he's building all the stupid features that Excel has, and he's constantly thinking, why can't we just use Microsoft? What's wrong with this? Why can't we just sell it with it? So, they feel bad about it. Then they come home, they see Firefox, and they go, oh, I'd like to introduce this new feature. Or I'd like to be able to sort certain things, so let me change that in the code. Well, then you can see, okay, that's something they really love. Community, feeling of accomplishment, gives me a feeling of competence. Myself, let me see. Yeah, important activity for myself. Let me see. And seeking, providing advice, so I really like it. You see this on the mailing list a lot. People try to be a little bit pedantic sometimes. I'm not sure if you ever looked at these mailing lists. It's a lot of fun to read them. Yeah, sometimes you see like some user asking a noob question, just the term noob was born on these things, and then like a newbie question, and then somebody will go like, oh, you're noob, well let me explain you, and then at the end of the day they feel great about themselves, but not as great as for doing the code, writing the code they want to code. So extrinsic. I will sell customization services. Well, there we go. There you have the story of many open source companies. Sell products related to the project I participate in. So this is the case of Jackrabbit. GX uses Jackrabbit as one of the core components in their system. GX has largely improved it. They maybe added 75% of code to the old project, so it's really turned into something. Let me say, it makes me more marketable. I will make money from my participation, so those are the Ubuntu employees. And yeah, it raises my skill level and knowledge. This is true for all of you. I mean, even if you don't do any coding, but you do something content-wise or translation-wise, it's great for your experience. So feel free to, if you have some free time, help people on the web. Altruism, I think I'm making the point clear. Help each other out. I can make a resulting solution publicly available. Well, obviously there's many reasons why people want to do this, and I want you to know a number of them for the exam. Oh yes, then open source adoption. Let me see what this was about. Oh yeah, so why do people not use open source at the moment? So lack of perceived business benefit, not invented here syndrome, all of the above, internal standards, vendor support, accountability. So these are basically the main reasons why people say not for us. But there's still many companies that are very skeptical towards open source. Okay, maybe give an example. Banks, insurance companies, web security companies, they have to be very careful with open source. So lack of perceived business benefit. This is actually one that I'm a little bit worried about sometimes. The Dutch software industry suffers from this a lot. Not invented here means if you ask a developer, should we buy this piece of software? It will make you 10 times more productive. Then the developer will go, I can build that in one day, and then why would we pay 10,000 euros to get this done? I can do it in a weekend. And, but then if you tell the developer, all right, do it in a weekend, then the developer says, I'm too busy. So that's and then there's always this not invented here of, well, it can't be good. It's from another company, so let's not work with that. And of course, also really important, accountability. So you always want to be able to say, if your system crashes, you want to say, yeah. But the vendor, Microsoft, their IIS, Internet Information Server, it's just it's crap. It's broken. So let's call Microsoft. No, let's sue them. Whereas with an open source organization, who the hell are you going to sue? The Apache Foundation. Apache Foundation says, sorry, there's a big disclaimer in our code. If you use it, it's at your own risk. And if it's broken, fix it. You can. All right, so take a look. So now we're going to go through, we have some more time. We're going to go through all the open source business models that are available, and they are many. I didn't even know there were this many until I saw the whole overview. If you just listen for yourself, you'll see like, oh wow, there are really many. So the main outline, of course, service, support, education, and extensions. So a good example, of course, is we talked about Stabiplan before. Stabiplan builds Stabicat, and they have Stabicat Lite, which works on the open source, more or less, IntelliCat platform. So, well, they build extensions. You can also imagine an extension on the iPhone, a 10 euro app or 40 euro app that does navigation. Obviously, oh well, I'm taking the wrong example because that's a commercial thing again. But, well, extensions, I think I was clear about that. Education, it could be that you supply some extra education with every Ubuntu install. I think Canonical does this. They come to your office, they fly, so they have lots of US-based guys and UK-based guys flying all over the world installing Ubuntu for companies. Support, same story. You can get a subscription with Red Hat, and for 500-600 euros a year, you can constantly call them and ask them silly questions. And of course, service. Service is the widest possible definition, and you all know what different services there are by now. There's implementation services, there's deployment services, there's debugging, there's all kinds of different services. So open source companies, you probably wouldn't expect all these to be named here, but well, IBM is perhaps one of the biggest players in this area. And let me see. Oh, that's interesting. So I see Apache, I see Linux, I see Secure Mailer and AlphaWorks. The biggest one missing here is Eclipse. They were one of the first, pullers of Eclipse, and they are still a driving force behind it. Then Apple. Apple apparently releases still some core layers of Mac OS X to the outside world. Darwin is of course one they contribute to. QuickTime streaming server, but they're, you have to doubt their, not doubt, but there's commercial interest invested in there as well. HP, Sun is now Oracle. I have the feeling, Red Hat, of course, is a purely open source company, so here it is. Active State sells professional tools for these development tools. Just a quick question. Who here would consider working for an open source company? Yeah? Anybody else? Yeah? Any specific reason? Why would you go earlier for an open source than a commercial company, or is that not even, you find both interesting?
I find both interesting.
I would say if you have the opportunity, there is a lot of growth in this. So I already mentioned, if you want to start a business, it might be very interesting. I know a guy who has a company, has about 14 employees now, and they're growing 2-3 people per year. So like I said, he will soon be 20 people doing sugar CRM. Well, I think we all know what's going to happen. Soon he will drive by my house in a nice red Ferrari. Let me see if I see how far we still have to go. Not work. Alright, so I'll just keep going. New hybrid model, I think you'll see this. Also very interesting, provide monetary rewards for development by shifting the value from licensing agreements to additional services. That's, I think, so these are some of these services: packaging, consultancy, maintenance, and training. So here you see some more business models. So support sellers, loss leader, widget frosting, accessorizing, service enabler, brand licensing, sell it, free it, software franchising, and hybrids. So these are all the different ones. Some of them are largely successful and others aren't. We're going to go through each one of these with an example, so maybe we should save that for after the break. So let's be back here at about 2:10. Be able to